Hi, my name is Anneleen, and on this channel I talk about books, fashion, lifestyle, and sometimes also Taylor Swift. But today I'm going to be talking about two online book platforms. I'm going to compare Goodreads and the Storygraph. I'm going to argue why the Storygraph is better and why you should move over. Now, a little disclaimer, I have disliked Goodreads way before I found out about the Storygraph, and most of what I'm going to be talking about in this video is going to be based on my personal experiences and opinions. So if you love Goodreads and you really enjoy using it and you want to keep doing so, please go ahead. No hard feelings, we can still be friends. I'm not here to judge you or to stop you from using Goodreads. I would just like to point out some of the advantages of using the Storygraph. And why am I doing this? That's because I have been talking about the Storygraph and mentioning it in my videos for a while now, but I've never really done a deep dive into why I think it's so amazing. And I would like to spread the word about the platform. Before we get into this video, I am going to be showing footage from the Storygraph so I can show you the things that I'm talking about, but I won't be doing that for Goodreads because I deleted my account a few months ago and I really don't want to create a new one. So I can't make my own footage of the site. I might try to find some screenshots, but I'm not entirely sure if that will work. So keep that in mind. I am assuming that you know what Goodreads looks like, right? And that you have used it. That being said, I'm ready to completely destroy Goodreads now, to the best of my ability. First, I want to talk about who owns the platform. As you might know, Goodreads is owned by Amazon. Amazon started off as a book-selling website, which I can only applaud, like, go for it. But of course, over the years, Amazon has grown to be much more than that, and it has also been surrounded by scandals. I don't really want to go into them. Apparently, they treat their workers really badly. It's just not something I can support. Also, Jeff Bezos doesn't seem to be like a great person. I don't really like the way that he spends his money and the way that he avoids taxes and things like that. So yeah, I just don't really feel comfortable using Goodreads because of that. I also don't really feel comfortable watching Amazon Prime shows. On the other hand, the Storygraph's CEO and founder is Nadia Aldunayo. I hope that I pronounced that correctly. I'm not entirely sure. She is directly involved with everything on the platform. And she's also the person running the social media accounts, which I love. Their Instagram, I don't know, I watch their stories all the time, even though it's mostly just them reposting stories from Storygraph users. But they give like little comments and they tell you about like, oh, you can also do this and that. So it's a really useful and just heartwarming social media page. She also talks about the books that she's reading, so it makes it feel a lot more personal. Also, the team behind the Storygraph is currently only 3 people, and they work with volunteers as well. And when you send an email to the supports, I think her name is Abby, she responds really quickly and really nicely. So yeah, just the team behind the Storygraph is really nice. It might be that the team behind Goodreads itself is as nice or fun as the team on the Storygraph, but I just don't really feel like there is a way of connecting to them. It makes Goodreads a lot more faceless than the Storygraph is. Nadia also actively listens to feedback. For example, they have implemented a new feature called Buddy Reads, where you can ask a friend to read a book with you, and as you progress throughout the book you can like add little comments for each other. But when you're reading different editions of the same book, it might happen that your page 100 is not the same as your buddy's page 100, and because they didn't want anyone to spoil the other, they had like a 5% buffer, I guess, but the users didn't particularly like it, so she listened to the feedback. And I think now the feature is that you get a warning saying that you have different editions. It might be the case that you get spoiled, and then you can decide for yourself if you want to see the message. So that just goes to show that there is a very nice feedback loop, and she does really take into account what you're saying. She has a blog where she keeps track of new features that are coming up, when they are coming up, and how far along in the process they are. It's really useful and insightful. An obvious win for the Storygraph. It's just a lot more personal. It's owned by a Black woman, and she obviously has a heart for the community. Now, moving on, I want to talk about the UI, or the user interface. The original reason why I started disliking Goodreads was the terrible UI, and Basically, my problem with it is that it is really ugly. I hate that beige color. I hate that it hasn't changed since, I don't know, the first time I started using it, which must have been like 10 years ago, probably 2012, 2013, something like that. It's not very appealing, it's not very intuitive, it is cluttered, and it's just a pain to look at. I hate the color. There's so much stuff that you can do, and I guess some of it is really nice, and some people really enjoy those things. I'm not one of them. I don't really care about the forums or the book clubs or the author talks or the giveaways. But other than the fact that I don't use them, I find it really hard to navigate this website. There's so many links that you can click, so many menus and sub-menus, and it's just, and also it's just terrible to look at. That is my main gripe with it. The Storygraph, on the other hand, is very minimalist, and I can understand why some people don't like that either. It has like 4 menu options, and then you have like a secondary menu underneath your profile picture, and it's a lot easier to navigate. I especially like that when you log on to the site or open the app, you instantly see the books that you're reading and also some books that are recommended to you. I have to admit, there definitely are some things that could be improved. For example, when you want to change your reading progress and change it to 100%, it doesn't automatically mark your book as finished, which doesn't really make sense to me, so you have to change the status separately. And once you've done that, I always need to take a few seconds to find the add a review button, because that's why I like using it. It always takes me a while to find it. It's really small, and I wish it was just a bigger button, because I'm assuming that people who have read a book want to write a review or give it some stars on a 5-star scale, right? But that might just be me. I would like the button to be bigger. Related to the UI, I really disliked that when you logged on to Goodreads, the first thing that you saw was the community page. So you can see what your friends are reading, what books they've added to a bookshelf, how many stars they gave a book, things like that. And it gave me so much stress. I kept comparing myself to all of my friends, and mind you, I studied literature. So all of my friends are really into reading, and they were a lot more into reading than I was. I may have studied literature, but I also studied linguistics, and I was there for the linguistics. So although I do like reading, and I like a good book, just seeing how many classics they were reading, or how many books in general they were reading, it gave me so much stress, because I was like, I should be reading more, shouldn't I? Or I should be reading this book, or I shouldn't be reading The Hunger Games, or I should be reading blah blah blah. It was just stressful. I hated it. And that was one of the reasons that I stopped going onto Goodreads, because every time I went on there, I had to compare myself. And on the Storygraph, the community tab is just kind of like hidden away, and it's a lot less stressful. Maybe that is because I just don't have that many friends on the Storygraph, but nevertheless, I like that I can just check it whenever I want to and not having to look at it and compare myself anytime I want to use the platform. Lastly, I want to talk about the graphs that the Storygraph make. It's probably my favorite thing about the platform. You can look at what genres that you prefer reading, what the moods of your books are, what author you have read the most, what the average rating you gave your books in a certain month or year was, or of all time. And if you get the Plus subscription, you can even compare months or years to each other. I don't have a Plus subscription, but I might get one actually, because I just really like it, but that might be more useful if I read more books. And Goodreads just doesn't give you as much insight, I feel. Or if it does, then I never found it. And I think the reason for that is because Goodreads wants to be a social media platform more than that it wants to be a book tracker, because it wants to act like Facebook, right? You can comment on other people's reviews, you can go into the forums, you can just do lots of social media things. But that's not what I personally used Goodreads for, and I don't think that is what the majority of the people who use Goodreads use it for. And the Storygraph really focuses on you and your individual reading experience and what books you've read, how many pages you've read, what might be books that you are interested in. It just feels like it has a lot more focus than Goodreads does. Goodreads kind of feels all over the place, right? And the Storygraph is kind of implementing more of those social media things. Like, you used to only be able to follow people, but now you can also befriend them. The buddy reads feature that I was talking about is one of those social media things. But it's clear that it's not the main focus, and that it is also not the main appeal to people. There's this challenge going on, the Read Every Day in January challenge, and it's just designed for you to get into the habit of reading, and you don't get to compare it to other people. You just see your nice little graph about how many pages you've read, and it is frankly a really good challenge for me. I did get into reading a lot more easily. And you know, it might be the case that Goodreads has those things as well. I've just never discovered them. But it feels like that is not the main focus of Goodreads. They just want to be like the Facebook of books. But to be honest, who is on Facebook anymore these days? Now, have I convinced you to move over to the Storygraph? I might not have, because one of the things that you might be worried about is, but Anneleen, I have logged all of my books that I've read in the past however many years, and I don't feel like doing it all over again. I have good news for you. You can just import your Goodreads library onto the Storygraph and it'll have all of the data. I believe it says it could take up to 24 hours, but I feel like depending on how big your library is, it goes a lot more quickly. I've heard people waiting for 15 minutes, maybe an hour, things like that. It's actually really convenient. So there's one concern out of the way. Also, when you create an account, you get a little survey about what are the kind of books that you like reading, what are the books that you dislike reading. It also has a feature where you can add in certain things that you want to avoid in books, some things that might trigger you, so that's really useful. People add in content warnings for the books manually and they get checked regularly, so it's a really safe space for that as well. I feel like that is very considerate and it might be very useful for some people. I have to admit that I didn't move over my Goodreads library, but that is mainly because I disliked using Goodreads so much that I just didn't keep my library up to date. So I just added in the books that I thought were most important for some of the stats and some of the recommendations so that the Storygraph knew what the things were that I liked, and then I could get new recommendations based on those books. Anyway, I will wrap things up here. If you use a Storygraph, let me know what some of your favorite features are. If I have convinced you to move over to the Storygraph, great, let me know what you think. And if I haven't and you still want to keep using Goodreads, good for you, but I really want to know why. Tell me. I would like to keep this discussion going in the comments and I would like to see your perspective. Also, I know that I said that the Storygraph is a lot less focused on the social media platform aspect of Goodreads, but you can always add me as a friend or follow me. My name on the Storygraph is just Anneleen, so let's connect on there and you can see what I'm reading. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my content, you can always subscribe. I make videos every Wednesday, so I will see you next week. Bye!